All right, Dustin Baker, VikesNow, April 11th. NFL draft is what, 16 days away? And among a popular talker or two are the eventual whereabouts of Dalvin Cook and Za'Darius Smith. And I will set this up for any newcomers to the show or to Vikings news in general. On Dalvin Cook, this running back, who's been with the Vikings since 2017, is scheduled to incur a $14.1 million cap hit to the Vikings' books in 2023. That's a lot. On top of that, Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, the general manager, re-signed Alexander Mattison for 2 years and $7 million last month. And this guy, Kwesi, is known as the analytics guy, the Wall Street guy. And most don't think that a guy who subscribes to that philosophy, the analytics one, is going to want to pay a running back room $20 million because it goes against everything he allegedly believes. Therefore, and the Madison re-signing fell out of the sky. I tend to think that he would be back. I thought he and Chandler would formulate a running back by committee. We shall see. Cook still has to be traded for that to be right. But I thought Madison would ultimately return on a cheap deal. I thought we overinflated his value on the open market. And yeah, Cook would either be released or traded. Well, now it feels like it's in that trade realm, especially with nothing happening since. There were rumors that he was shopped to the Dolphins, but then the Dolphins just re-signed all of their running backs from last year. I still think the Falcons make sense. But he was in the trade rumor mill. I think there was some smoke or rumor that he didn't pass a physical, and therefore everything put on hold. He had surgery to repair a shoulder that was nagging him for 3 years. All kinds of weird stuff in the Cook sweepstakes. I ultimately believe he will be traded. I don't think he will or should take a pay cut. And he'll be 28 this season. Still, a year or two left of perhaps prime performance. But yeah, we're going to talk about what he should fetch on the open market. But that's the setup. We don't think that the same group of running backs will be back. At least I don't. Bless your heart if you do. You could tell me why in the comments. And on Za'Darius Smith, about 5 weeks ago, he said, "See ya, goodbye," on Twitter. He thanked Skull Nation, as he called it, Minnesota and Minnesotans. And it appeared that he was going to be released. That never happened, and now he's still on the roster even after the Vikings signed somebody for his job, who was Marcus Davenport, 1 year, $13 million from the Saints. He's a Viking. So if Za'Darius Smith is not traded and they come to a kumbaya, that will mean that the Vikings have a very expensive and very deep edge rushing department. It would be Danielle Hunter, Za'Darius Smith, Marcus Davenport, Patrick Jones, and DJ Wanham, among some other guys, like Luigi Villan, guys who will compete for a job this summer. So you're in a good spot. Whether Za'Darius Smith is traded or ultimately released, I think it would be a trade by now, especially because some of his salary guaranteed for 2023. It's either going to be you get something for Za'Darius or he's back after a come-to-Jesus conversation with the Vikings, and you have an ultra-deep edge rusher room. But I don't think either man will be part of the 2023 Vikings. I think we're tunneling toward a trade of both or each. So let's discuss Dalvin Cook. We've been in the rumor mill where I think there's a lot of Vikings fans that are like, yeah, we'll get a third rounder for him because he's Dalvin Cook. And I think that is a bunch of best laid plans. So to set this up, I'm going to go through some history of running back trades, not going back to too far because that would be stupid. But 6 months ago, Christian McCaffrey, who was 26 at the time, he still might be 26, was traded to the 49ers from the Panthers for a second, a third, a fourth, and a fifth. The Vikings aren't going to fetch anything near that whatsoever, so cross that off. But perspective, a guy who's productive, more productive than Cook, got a mini King's ransom, M-I-N-I, King's ransom for a running back. So that kind of set the market. But let's see. 4 days later, James Robinson from the Jacksonville Jaguars was traded to the Jets for a 6th rounder. Of course, Dalvin Cook is better than James Robinson, but James Robinson is younger, had a great rookie season. What was that, 2 years ago? 3 years ago? Can't remember which one. Fantasy football players will remember that he was a decent start in your flex spot or whatnot. So a 6th rounder for Robinson, a second, a third, a fourth, and a fifth for McCaffrey. And then I want you to follow me here. In 2019, so yes, 4 years ago, At the peak of his powers, which wasn't terribly long, Kenyon Drake was sent to the Dolphins from the Cardinals at age 25 for a 5th rounder. And I know that he doesn't have the big name pizzazz as Dalvin Cook, but at the time, Kenyon Drake was coming on up and was going to be something pretty good. He kind of stalled. He's a decently productive. But if you kind of mash all those together, whether it's the Panthers trading McCaffrey, or Robinson to the Jets for a 6th rounder, or the good version of Kenyon Drake to the Dolphins for a 5th rounder, I think I've settled on in the NFL draft, or if they're going to wait until after that, who knows. I think Dalvin Cook is probably worth a mid to low 4th rounder. I think that'll do the trick. He hit several home runs last year and arguably saved, 2 or 3 Vikings games? I'm not kidding. Saved them from destruction. The Bills game, for sure. They were down, 27-10 in third quarter. Boom. Cookie hits a home run. Vikings were back in it. The rest is glorious history. And there was the game against the Dolphins where he broke off a 70-something yarder, and that seemed to shift the momentum tide. I was at that game. And then, of course, the comeback against the Colts. Cook was absolutely instrumental. So he still has that playmaker, big play persona in his toolkit. And some team will be able to use that for a year or 2. So I think Cook is worth a mid to low 4th rounder. I think when your phone buzzes during the draft, if this all comes to fruition, it'll be Cook for a 4th. And if that's too greedy, then a 5th. But I really think it'll be a 4th. And teams that I think to watch, number 1 with a bullet are the Falcons. They have the cap space to take on what would be the remainder of his salary, at least the dead cap hit. They don't have a bang-up running back room. They like to do funky stuff like not use Kyle Pitts. They'll have Desmond Ridder there, who needs all the help he can get. Their running back room is Tyler Algier and Cordero Patterson. Does that really move the needle for you? If it does, so be it. So I think the Falcons make the most sense on paper. And then the Broncos, you always got to look at the ties between George Paton. He used to work here. Perhaps Sean Payton would get involved in the Cook sweepstakes. Chargers are interesting because who knows if Eckler's going back there. They're accustomed to a certain way of living. Cook could step in and be Eckler light for production. The Bengals, same thing. They won't have Joe Mixon. I don't know if they want just an anonymous dude. And then the Bills because of the brotherly ties. And they're not going to – the team won't eat all of this guaranteed cap hit. The Vikings will have to do some of that. But, yeah, I think Falcons, Broncos, Chargers, Bengals, Bills are the teams to watch in the ever-evolving Dalvin Cook sweepstakes. All right, so I declare, we'll see if it comes true. If I'm an idiot, probably not. 4th rounder when it's all said and done for Cook. Next, Za'Darius Smith, who we don't think's coming back. If he does, great. But last October, the Chicago Bears traded Robert Quinn, who was 32 at the time, I still think he's 32, to the Philadelphia Eagles for a 4th rounder. The Eagles were involved in an arms race at the trade deadline, trying to get richer to win the Super Bowl. They got there, couldn't finish the job against Patrick Mahomes' Chiefs, but nevertheless, Quinn was acquired for a 4th rounder. The year before, the Kansas City Chiefs traded for Melvin Ingram, who was 32. I should level set and say Za'Darius is 30. He'll be 31 right when the season starts. Ingram was 32, and the Chiefs had to spend a 6th rounder. And then in a move that you're familiar with, if you've been around here for longer than 3 years, in 2020, the Vikings dealt Yannick Ngakoue after their ill-fated trade to the Ravens for a 3rd and a 5th. And Ngakoue was 25, so 6 years younger than Za'Darius. So when this one is all said and done, and this one could break different ways, I think there's probably a better chance that Za'Darius comes back than Dalvin. That's just a gut instinct. I don't have intel. But I think if and when a Za'Darius Smith trade materializes, I think that'll be for a 5th rounder. Perhaps a very low 4th, but I'm settling on a 5th rounder for Za'Darius' services. If he was 2 years, 3 years younger, you could probably stretch that into a 3rd or a 4th. But he's going to be 31. Some think he had a disappearing act in the second half of the season. I'm here to tell you that the sacks just vanished. The pressures did not. Pressures still matter. But he wasn't quite as good no matter how you dice it down the stretch of last year. So I think a soon-to-be 31-year-old Za'Darius from some team will get the Vikings a 5th rounder. Teams to watch there. This is a list based on need. I made this about a month ago when I wrote something for Vikings territory. The 49ers could get rich as hell and get Za'Darius Smith and have one of the best defensive fronts you could ever possibly imagine. So I would always keep the 49ers in mind, especially because Kwesi Adofo-Mensah has communication ties there. That's where he got his start. Baltimore Ravens, Za'Darius almost went there last year. That's where he was drafted. They cannot be ruled out, and their edge rusher room isn't very scintillating. So I think that one is probably number one with the bullet, is that Za'Darius heads back to Baltimore. The Falcons need edge rusher help. The Cardinals have all of these former Vikings coaches, don't have very many good edge rushers. And the same goes for the Seahawks. I could see them getting involved for Za'Darius. So to recap, that's the 49ers, Ravens, Falcons, Cardinals, Seahawks, kind of in order, in my opinion, of where he might be traded. So what I've determined through studying a little bit of history, recent history, going back to about 2019, in my opinion, we shall see if I'm right, Dalvin Cook will fetch a 4th rounder and Za'Darius Smith probably a 5th rounder. We'll be back on Thursday. We're going to talk with Allie Elise from Vikings Twitter. She loves the NFL draft. She loves the purple and gold team. We're going to pick her mind about her Vikings thoughts. And on Friday, Josh Fry will be here to rank his top 7 dudes from the positions of need for the Vikings. So he'll have his 7 top quarterbacks, QBs, 7 wide receivers, 7 corners, CBs, and then he's going to throw in some off-ball linebackers. He'll motor through those so we keep the episode to about 15, 20 minutes. That's all I got for Tuesday, and Skol, baby.